Up until this point, all of our queries have been about individuals. We've asked to get the names of all the English majors, or we've asked to add up the total number of credits each student expects to have at the end of the semester. Our answers in all of these cases are lists of students. There might be 4 students, there might be all 10, but our answer is each student is on a line with the information we asked for about that student. But what if we'd like to create a query that asks about a group? What if we want to know what the average GPA is from all the sociology students? That's going to require some new techniques, and we have 2 options here. We can use something called groups. That's a more comprehensive option, and we'll see that in future videos. But if we just want to find the answer really quickly, we can use something called a totals row. And we can even make that a little bit more powerful using something called a parameterized query. That's a complex sounding term, but it's a very basic idea. So let's figure out the average GPA of sociology majors. I've created a basic query here with the 2 pieces of information I really need. GPA, I need that if I'm going to figure out the average. And major, I need that if I'm only going to include sociology students. I've also included the first and last name. I don't need those, but it's not going to hurt anything either. I'm kind of used to just having the name in my results, so we'll leave those there for now. GPA I'll leave alone. We'll do something after we get results with that. But the major, I need to add a criteria to. So now we've got sociology. When I run the query, we're only going to see the 4 sociology students. As with everything in this database, this is a really small number of students. So we really could calculate the average GPA by hand. But we don't want to do that for 2 reasons. One, we want to be able to do this with much larger databases that might have hundreds of people in sociology or thousands or millions as well. Second, this GPA is going to change a lot. At the end of every semester, we might want to know the updated information. We'd rather just do a little bit of extra work and have Access calculate it for us. So in the Home ribbon, I'm going to click the Totals button right here. Clicking the Totals button adds a new row to the bottom of my results. And I'm going to click under GPA and choose Average. And there's my answer. The average GPA of all the sociology students is 2.52. I know that because I'm including all the sociology students and I'm choosing the average of their GPA. Now, GPA average makes the most sense, but you'll notice there's some other options that might make sense for a different type of information. I could sum things up, or I could take the maximum or the minimum, or some other statistical values. Things like last name, on the other hand, taking an average or adding up a last name doesn't make sense at all. So for text underneath that, I don't have an option of adding or averaging. I can just count, but that's still helpful. That's telling me there are 4 students in this database who are sociology majors. The really nice thing about this is I can go back and edit my query. So I could look for history majors, for example. And when I run this, my totals row is still here. So there are 2 history majors. They have an average GPA of 2.235. And I can do that really for any major I'd like. But let's say we do this a lot. We're often interested in the average GPA of a major, and we often change which major we're interested in. We could just keep editing the query and changing the criteria to whichever major we are interested in. But there are a few disadvantages to that. What we'd really like is to just have Access ask us which major we're interested in when we run the query. That has a few different advantages. 1, it's just a little bit faster. 2, if we have complex criteria down here, it's easy if we're editing that to mess something up. And 3, if we're creating this query for someone else to use, they don't have to learn how to edit the query. They just have to know how to run it, and then they type in the major they're interested in. So what we're going to do is something called a parameterized query. A parameter is basically just information Access is asking you for. We've actually seen parameters before when we mistyped something, so let's see that again. I'm going to get rid of the criteria down there so we see all students. And then I'm going to type major up here in square brackets, but I'm going to misspell it. I've got an extra J. Now when I run the query, it asks me to enter a parameter value. Basically, it's asking me, what is major with 2 J's? if I type English, what's going to happen is it's going to list that major with 2 J's for every single student. Because it didn't know, it looked in the table for major with 2 J's, it wasn't there, and so it asked me for that information. So we've got for each student their first name, their last name, their GPA, their actual major spelled correctly, and whatever I typed in. So for every single student, it lists English here. We can use that, but not up in the field, down here in the criteria. What I would like to do is, if I type in English here, I would like it for every single student to look and see, is the major that they have equal to what I typed in here when it asked me to enter a major. So I'm going to run it, and it's going to say, enter a major. I'll type in English, and now only students whose major matches what I type in show up. I can run this again and type sociology, and now my 4 sociology students show up. So just running the query multiple times but typing in a different major gives me the information about that major. 2.52 average GPA with a total of 4 students. So that's parameterized queries, and that helps to make this total row particularly helpful.